So Harriet's sick and couldn't go out. Sore throat, high fever. There are a few things it could be. A lot of just simple colds manifest like that. But when I hear this, my first thought is strep throat. Um, and that's a fairly common thing nowadays. It's a fairly common thing back then. But nowadays, you take a little antibiotics and it's done for. Um,
I think Rowan's had a strep throat.
Lolly says that she thinks that you've had a strep throat. Your dad used to get strep throat all the time until he had his tonsils out. Because what happens is strep is short for Streptococcus aureus, a bacteria. And what happens is when it starts growing on the back of the throat, it causes these little pustules, and so they talked about this infection with the pus. And the little pustules, when they heal, create these little crevices, and the little crevices allowed food to get trapped, and this happens on the tonsils. And when the food gets trapped, that gives a place for the strep to grow. And so once you've had this sort of thing happen, it happens more and more and more often. And sometimes the tonsils just get so badly degraded that the doctors think it's best to just take them out. It's a fairly simple procedure, and it often prevents further strep throats. My brother, when he was about 10, was told by the doctor, look, if you get one more case of strep throat, tonsils are coming out. He never got it again. Just by sheer force of will, he decided he was never going to get it again. And he didn't. Um, but as I said, now, strep is treated with antibiotics. It responds well to penicillin, it responds to amoxicillin. If that doesn't work, there's a couple of other things. Um, where it's like, okay, we will give you this amoxicillin augmentin. Augmentin is the name of the drug, and it's amoxicillin with clavonic acid or something like that. And the clavonic acid doesn't actually do anything. It just blocks the way that the bacteria protects itself from the antibiotic. So the antibiotic keeps it from building its cell wall, and if it can't build its cell wall, it can't reproduce. If it can't reproduce, every time the immune system takes one bacteria down, there's no more to replace, and so eventually the immune system just wipes it out. But some bacteria developed a resistance where instead of using one enzyme, they use another enzyme, and this clavonic acid blocks the second enzyme from working. And blocking the second enzyme from working doesn't hurt the bacteria. If it's blocked, it's blocked. They use the first enzyme all the time, the second one. But the two things together end up killing a lot of bacteria. And then if that doesn't work, then you have to get into some serious, serious stuff. But anyway, so antibiotics have been around since World War One, and or at least the penicillin has been around since World War One. There were sulfa drugs before that, which are of limited effect. But at this point, 200 years in the past, there wasn't really much in the way of antibiotics. For some serious infections, they used some mixes with mercury in them. But I mean, you don't want to go swallowing mercury things because that's kind of worse usually than whatever the bacteria is doing to you. So there wasn't much treatment. And the strep bacteria can cause some other diseases. One of them is called scarlet fever. So if you ever read an old book, if I ever read an old book to you and they talk about scarlet fever, it's caused by the same thing. Except that is not contained to the throat. That's more of a systemic thing, and it shows up with red blotches all over your skin. So instead of just the red blotches on the back of your throat, it's you get the red blotches all over your skin. It can also cause kidney disease and heart disease. When it infects the heart, it's called rheumatic fever. And what used to happen before antibiotics was people would get sick with strep throat. And they would sort of get over it, but not quite. And the bacteria was around in their body. And it would go and it would attack the heart. Or it would attack the kidneys. And then they would just be sick. And they would just be worn down. And then if their body could eventually overcome it, you would have these people who were just like sort of torn apart by this disease, and it just lingered with them because of the damage done to the heart and the damage done to the kidneys. And so they were much more likely to get similar things, or they were much more vulnerable to the other things that damage the heart and damage the kidneys. And so, if they started drinking more, then the drinking would hurt them more. If they smoked, the smoking would hurt their heart more than it would hurt a normal person. So strep is like one of those things that's just kind of like basic and there, and for the most part doesn't hurt people. I mean, I saw this thing that said that 30% of the people have strep on their skin. So if you just went around with a cotton swab people's hands, arms, face, whatever, 30% of those, if you put the cotton swab onto a plate, would pop up with strep. And so that's one of those things that's like, it's everywhere. But then it isn't. It's not the bad one. And science isn't entirely sure of why it goes from, well, this is just something that lives on our skin and, it just doesn't really do anything, to this is killing people. Then the next thing, Mr. John Knightley, Emma's brother-in-law, or the brother of her brother-in-law. I guess that makes him still her brother-in-law. He was like, Mr. Elton is sweet on you. She's like, no, he's sweet on Harriet. And he points out some things. It's like, no, look at the way he talks to you. And Emma's like, nah, he doesn't think it's entirely possible. But at the same time, he passes up a chance to help Harriet out and, be by her bedside and take care of her in a completely appropriate way, to go off to a party with Emma. Yeah. And then Emma thinks to herself, it's amazing how people who think they're so smart can be so wrong and miss things. That's kind of, that's close to lampshading. So lampshading is this trope where if there's something that is just absolutely beyond belief, you point it out to the audience. You point it out to the reader, you point it out to the people around. You point it out to the audience, the people watching the movie, the people who are reading the book, where one of the characters says, this is an absurd thing. And the reason why you do that is you make it slightly more believable. It's like, oh yes, these people are in a situation and they realize that it's absurd. It must not be all that absurd. It comes from a theater trope. It comes from the theater, where what they would do is if they wanted to highlight something as being absurd, they would put a red lampshade on the thing. And so it just stands out to the audience that, hey, this is something fishy, and then you point it out. And the whole idea of things being lampshaded was played with in cartoons all the time, because you would have someone and they would try to hide and they would take the lampshade off of the lamp and they would put it on their head, and then no one would see them or recognize that it was the person hiding. I mean, Bugs Bunny, Woody Woodpecker, the whole lot did this regularly, where it's like, okay, I need to hide, and he's like, grab the lampshade. It is like Tom was all of a sudden under the lampshade and the dog couldn't find him. Spike couldn't find Tom, and then once Spike left, Tom put the lampshade back and went off looking for Jerry. So that's lampshading. That's Emma being told that, hey, maybe Mr. Elton likes you and not Harriet, because Emma is a far better catch than Harriet. Harriet has no real name. She has okay manners, okay style, okay everything. But Emma is like marked off as perfection. I mean, she's rich, she's clever, she's well educated. And so, oh, and she succeeds at everything she puts her hand to without even really trying. You know, she goes and she draws well without even practicing. And she doesn't practice because she draws well enough without practicing. And she plays music and she sings and she dances and yada, yada, yada. But anyway, Emma is a far better catch than Harriet. And Emma doesn't quite see that, or doesn't quite understand why Mr. Elton would want her instead of the person she wants Mr. Elton to want. So we'll see how this goes.